On period five. This is really the beginning of period five, Manifest Destiny, which will define, and we'll be looking at the grabbing of Mexico and the territory from Mexico and the repercussions from that. So, Manifest Destiny, it's a form of nationalism that really swept the country in the middle of the 19th century. And the term comes from this guy, John L. O'Sullivan. He's a newspaper writer, and he's saying our manifest destiny is to overspread the continent allotted by Providence for the free development of our yearly multiplying millions. Now, what is that saying? Well, manifest is not really a word that's used too often anymore, but manifest means obvious. It's our obvious future that we're going to control the entire continent that has been given to us by God for the free development of our citizens. That we are going to overrun the continent, and that North America belongs to the Americans. And this feeling of nationalism is very similar to previous notions like that city on the hill, or that America is God's chosen people, and we'll see this coming up again. This upswing of nationalism. And yes, so the belief America's destiny is to control the entire North American continent, to spread, American values to these areas, and that is God's will for America to spread territory from coast to coast, and to bring God, technology, and air quotes civilization to the West. Now, James K. Polk and the election of 1844, there's very much this feeling of expansion and manifest destiny, and he captured the essence of this nationalism. And he's a dark horse winner against Henry Clay in 1844. Now, what do we mean by a dark horse winner? Is that he was a surprise nominee, and then when he was, won the nomination for the Democratic Party, that everybody thought, oh, he doesn't stand a chance against Henry Clay. Now, in the election, though, Polk was very clear of what he wanted. He's going to take all of Oregon, all right, all of Oregon, which is all the way up into present-day Canada, and from the British, they have joint custody of that at this time. He's going to get California. How? Doesn't really elaborate. Through coercion, through paying for it, whatever. Texas will join, and then some other aspects, a lower tariff, an independent treasury, and he said, I'm going to do all this in the first term, and then I'm out. And he will. He will do all of those. And in 1844, he wins and defeats Clay. It's a pretty close election. If you look at the popular vote, that Polk had exactly 50%, Henry Clay 48%, and this Liberty Party, which is the party in favor of abolition of slaves, they stole enough votes from Clay here in New York, and it cost Clay. Now, look at the difference. New York is 36 electoral college votes. Had Clay won in New York, which he did not, then there would be 36 less votes for Henry Clay, for James Polk here in the electoral college votes. So that would be drop him down to, I'm going to do some math here, 124, 134. And then you look at what Clay would add. He's adding in 36. That would bring him to 141, and Henry Clay would have won this election. So the electoral college, it's one of its downfalls is that one state can often be the decision maker, and sometimes a third party is costing it for one. This would happen again in the election of 2000 between Al Gore and George W. Bush, and over Florida. And Florida was barely won by George Bush in that election, and Al Gore did not become president because of that, and he lost a good chunk of votes to a third party candidate, the Green Party, in that election, and we could have had a very different world today had that election in 2000 being different. Now, Polk, he's a strong president in the bad president's circus. And if you look at the worst 10 presidents in U.S. history, as sort of defined by polls of historians that have been done over time, we can see a lot of them are really right here. And this is Harding, and I believe this is George W. Bush over there, with Polk and Lincoln, two of the top 10 being in this sort of middle there. And so Polk comes in. Texas is annexed before he even becomes president. Outgoing President Tyler says, okay, he won, and he won on a promise to annex Texas, and so he wanted to actually, show that he's done something. So he annexed Texas, and then so Texas is being added, and with Oregon, during the campaign, he said, yeah, we'll fight for all of Oregon, which is from here, which is sort of present day, the northern border of California, all the way up to here. And he's saying we're going to get all of it. Well, that means fighting a war with the British. And once the election's over, now it's more like, okay, what's the best route to go? And so he put out feelers to Britain, who's also not really willing to fight a war over this. Now, they do have a dispute. Okay, we're not going to fight over it. We'll make a decision. The decision, where's the border going to be? Is it going to be here? Or is it going to be here? This river here, which is the Columbia River, which flows down here, and that would be the border. And it was sort of decided, okay, we'll make it here, this line right here. They're going to extend the border all the way to the Pacific Ocean, and they're going to split it in half. And today, the Oregon Territory includes Oregon right here, Washington State up here, city of Seattle, and others like Idaho over here. And there's a lot of Americans who are sort of making their way across here over the Oregon Trail and into the Willamette Valley here, which is a very fine piece of land, making that trek over. Now, with Mexico, okay, they've grabbed Texas. Now, remember, it's disputed where the border is. And Polk's going to say, okay, let's see if they're willing to sell. And he sends Polk sends a guy called Slidell down to buy the Southwest, in particular California. It's California that they want to get from Mexico. And he's offering $25 million, a fairly large amount of money for California, which is sparsely populated and is not, as important as it is today. It's not that massive population in big cities of LA and San Francisco, the big port of San Francisco. It's not that yet. He wants to buy basically, quite underpopulated region of Mexico. Now, the unstable Mexican government don't even, open the door and accept him into, let's have a talk. They made him just sit for months, and they just completely ignore him. And Polk then thought, okay, let's try to initiate a war with him, and he sends General Zachary Taylor to the Rio Grande, into what Mexico considers their own territory, right in there. Now, the rest of the country, they're looking upon this an possible war against Mexico, and many Southerners are quite in favor of this, increasing their political power, extending slavery, and in the North, a lot of paranoia that, to go to war against Mexico is all about expanding slavery, and abolitionists are strongly opposed to the possibility of war. Well, war is going to begin, and just as Polk had hoped, U.S. violates Mexico territory. Mexico attacks Taylor in this disputed area, and Polk, with a declaration of war in hand, goes to Congress saying, American blood has been shed on American soil. Well, that's questionable. Was American blood shed on American soil? But Congress very quickly and enthusiastically declares war, and you'd be surprised how feelings of nationalism can spur people to maybe do things that they don't want to do. There's a lot of opposition in the North to this war, but there's also a lot of support from it. The abolitionists are saying no, but they're a minority, and pretty much everybody else is saying, USA, USA, American blood shed on American soil. We must have our revenge. And so politicians are quite fearful of looking weak when countries going to war and support the war. And we got a very tepid Whig opposition, but we do get some. Congressman Lincoln, it's his first time as a congressman. He wants to be quite clear. where was American blood shed? Was it shed on American soil? And it's known as the spot resolution. Show me the spot. Where did this happen? And Polk ignores him. Henry David Thoreau, he refuses to pay taxes and got civil disobedience. Henry Clay and the Whigs, though in general, they voted in favor of fighting and funding the war, but are opposed to any annexation of Mexico's land. Now, the war itself, you don't need to know the details, but it's sort of a precursor to the later Civil War. A lot of the generals of the Civil War are going to be soldiers in this war. People like General Robert E. Lee, who was the greatest American general in the Civil War. He was really honing his skills as an artilleryman in this war. Ulysses S. Grant, who will be the northern leader in the Civil War, he's also fighting in this war, and learning lessons as well. Now, the main key idea is that they do capture Mexico City, and the Mexican government falls, and a treaty is sort of forced upon them, the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo, as it's known, in 1848. And wow, were the terms generous for the United States. Texas borders set at the Rio Grande. Mexico cedes western lands for $15 million. It's actually for about $18 million. And guarantee of rights of Mexicans living in these new territories of the United States. War enlarges the U.S. territory about a third, halves Mexico's territory, and Franklin Pierce shortly afterwards will authorize the Gadsden Purchase, which is the final border of the lower 48 states. What's today is the lower 48 states. And they said, we take nothing by conquest, thank God. They bought it from Mexico is sort of the thinking. Now that is, of course, just a blatant lie to say, yeah, no, we didn't take it from them. We paid them for it. BS on that. And Ralph Waldo Emerson was famous for saying, Mexico will poison us. I very much recognize that. Now, here's the new United States. This is the Gadsden Purchase right here. They purchased this little bit for $10 million. They wanted it as it's a good route for a railroad that was being proposed to go through there. And now they stretch from sea to shining sea, from the Atlantic Ocean to the Pacific Ocean. And we can see this territory, that Polk added. Polk added Texas, this Mexican secession here, the Oregon Territory. Look at all the land that he added. And in this respect, this is why he's often cited as being one of the best presidents. And he does step down after his 4 years. He was in declining health. He would die shortly afterwards. But I'm going to run for 1 year, so I'm going to do this, and he did all those things. But the argument can be made that really what he did is just exasperate the issue of slavery in the United States, which comes up shortly, during the war. The Wilmot Proviso, as it's known. Proviso, or provision, or like something just added to the end of a bill that's going through Congress. We've got a bill, you can always just add some things. And he said slavery to be outlawed in any territory gained from Mexico. Northerners say, yep, absolutely. We went to war to avenge, American blood being shed on American soil, not to grab any land. Slaveocracy of the Southern senators, those powerful slave owners in Congress, strongly condemn this. And it passes the House, meaning that, the House says no to expanding slavery into these areas, but not in the Senate, where Southerners still have, a very strong sway. And we see the increasing mistrust and paranoia between the two sections. And when the Senate and, the Southern slave owners say no to it, the North is like, aha, we knew it. You said this was not about expanding slavery, but it's about expanding slavery. And it's just a conspiracy to grab more lands and to continue to enslave people against their wills, and hoist this cruelty upon the people of the United States. Now, election shortly afterwards, Zachary Taylor was a general in the war and was sort of put onto the Whig ticket, and he's not really a Whig too much, but they win. But this is an election where there's really no burning issues other than well, that big one of slavery, but you don't really talk it too much. And we got a new party, the Free Soil Party. Martin Van Buren gains quite a few votes. We can see 10% of the votes, one of the most successful third-party candidates. And he and the Free Soilers were criticizing both the Whigs and the Democrats as being, you know, parties of the slaveholders, and not really taking a stand on this issue. Because they've been so successful, it's very difficult for the Whigs to vote, you know, against, or not vote it, but to deplore the war. You know, they have to argue that it was a success. So this was an issue, a campaign where there wasn't really a burning issue, but we're going to see that this will be the last of them, as now that they've grabbed this territory, it's the issue of slavery and the expansion of slavery is going to tear this country apart. All right, thank you very much for listening.